About a little over 2 years ago, in May of 2018, I went down to Guatemala and I put myself into a 10-day and 11-night dark room retreat down again in Guatemala on Lake Atitlan at a beautiful little retreat center called the Hermitage. And it is what it sounds like. It is a dark room retreat. It was 10 days and 11 nights in an absolute pitch black room by myself. Um, and I wanted to talk about that today, and because it's 2 years later. And what I find is that when you do a retreat or any sort of experience that has real value for you in your life, it's interesting to look at what has lasted. What were the real seeds of truth that took root and continue to have an influence on our lives a couple years later? So, this dark room retreat, I'm going to tell you today 5 real key transformational takeaways, transformational shifts in perspective and being that again have lasted or endured the test of time and still have influence on my life 2 years later. And I want to start with talking about why I went down on the retreat. And also, before I do that, know that I've got a link down below about the dynamics or the logistics of a dark room retreat, because a lot of people can't hear of the outcomes or the takeaways until their questions are answered about how does this whole thing work. I'm not going to address that here in this video, but down below I do have a link to another video that I did that really talk about the logistics of how a dark room retreat works, how you eat, how you go to the bathroom, how does it all set up and arrange. So that's there, and you can check that out. If this video has value for you today, if you find some good takeaways for yourself, please give it a thumbs up so that it becomes more available to other people, and subscribe to the channel. And there's a little bell here somewhere you can click on that will alert you when new videos are present. So have you ever done a darkroom retreat? Have you ever had an interest in a darkroom retreat? Is that something that is even compelling when you even first hear the concept of that? If so, go ahead, comment in the links below about why a darkroom retreat sounds compelling to you or may be of interest to you. I went down onto this retreat because I wanted to add to my practice of self-realization, of awakening the eternal essence of being, the eternal essence of consciousness that is typically veiled by our egoic identity. And I recognize in this work that one of the ways that this egoic construct of self, the self that we have constructed in our own mind of our worthiness or unworthiness or fears or belonging or not belonging, that story of self that is created in the mind, one of the ways that it perpetuates itself is it is constantly in play, evaluating and narrating life. What do I think about that? What do I think about that? Does that thrill me? Does that displease me? Does that threaten me? And that me who's asking that is not the true eternal nature of our being, our soul nature, our soul God dance, as I like to call it. The one that is saying, do I like that and do I not like that, and does that feel threatening or does that feel okay or displeasing? That self is the conditioned self, and it's basically narrating life, of saying, does this life condition feel good or threatening to my particular conditioning? And that conditioned self is not the true self. So I wanted to interrupt. I wanted to spend that period of time in the absolute dark so that that egoic identity didn't have that world of form to play with, to constantly reinforce itself with its opinions, its narrative, its assessments, and its judgments. So that's why I went down to do this darkroom retreat. And there's 5 real key transformational shifts that occurred for me there, and I want to share those with you today. So the first one is the recognition that the mind makes up everything. The mind makes up everything. That's its primary beauty and job, is to be a creative force, to constantly be creating things, to constantly be curious about, well, if I took this and put it together with that, what would be created? And what if I pulled it apart and it would make something else? And it's that beautiful flexibility of creativity is what the mind is good at. It's always making up things and trying out what it makes up in the world, trying it out, seeing if it fits. We gave that mind the job of identifying who we are, of telling us who we are. It's always making stuff up. And we gave that mind the job of making us up. And we believe it. What it made up, we believe as true. That's huge to recognize that. So let me tell you how that really came to be in the darkroom retreat, how that knowing really landed deeply. I went into the dark room initially with a candle, so I knew what the room looked like. I knew that it was this beautiful room, almost like cave-like, that was embedded. All the walls were inlaid with these river stones. So I knew where the bed was and the sink and the shower and the meditation platform, and I knew what the room looked like. So then I blew out the candle, and there I was in the dark. About halfway through the retreat, I come out of a meditation and I look over to my right and I can see the wall. I can see the river stones. I can see the riverstone wall, and it was like splashed in a soft blue light. And I look over to my left and I can see that wall splashed in a soft red light, and I can see the ceiling and the floor. I can see the room. And it's a bit mind-blowing knowing I'm in the absolute pitch black and I can see this room in fairly good detail. And then I look over to the right again, and that wall is no longer a flat wall of stones. The stones are now kind of tumbling into the room. And I look over at that wall, and it's now a little bit closer. And I realize I'm not seeing the room. My mind is hallucinating the room. My mind is making the room up because it's not happy with the nothingness. It feels insecure with the emptiness, with the nothingness, and it needed to create a room. Now I'm looking across the room, and the wall in front of me, now I can only see about 3/4 of it. And there's almost like a darkness or a beam that is obscuring my ability to see the top part of the wall. So I'm now starting to see beams and obstructions coming in at weird angles in the room. It's like being down in the bottom of an old ship. All these beams and structures coming down at these odd angles. Now I know they're not there. I've been in the room for a good 4 days now, and I know that if I back myself up against the bed, I can walk about 10 steps through the absolute darkness and emptiness and get to the sink. But now I am seeing obstructions. And I'm walking across the room like this, like putting my hands out and pushing through these beams so that I don't hit my head on things that I know aren't there. The analogy is taking a look and recognizing that when we were toddlers, when the ego started to develop, we needed to have a sense of identity. And we didn't know the truth. Oh, I'm an individuated expression of the one divine consciousness, expressed through a perfectly tuned soul. We don't know that. And so we start to create an ego. We start to create a self through what our mom says and our dad says and what society says. And we piece all this together and we construct a self. That is a construct of the mind. The mind doesn't do well with emptiness. It needs to create stuff. And that leads us to the second real insight, is that the mind has no allegiance to truth. The mind, the construct of self in the mind, has no allegiance to the truth of us, the eternal nature of us. The mind isn't wired for truth. It isn't wired to know God. It isn't wired to be connected to the infinite grace of being. That's the heart. That's more of the heart's brain. The mind makes stuff up constantly, and it does not care if what it makes up gets in your way. The truth of you, the true and eternal nature of us. We know that, right? When we ask, what's getting in your way of really living in your true peace? It's always the mind, the thoughts. The mind has no allegiance to truth. It has no allegiance to you, to the true you. It only has allegiance to its own construct. We think that the mind puts up these defenses and walls and the ways we defend ourselves and disassociate from the world. We think that that is a protection, a youthful protection of us when the world is too difficult and disturbing to deal with. And it's not protecting us, it's protecting its own story. The mind is only protecting its own construct of you. So that's the second one. The first one is the mind makes up everything. Second is that the mind has no allegiance to truth. It's not wired for it. It's only protecting its own programming, its own constructs, its own conditioning. The third real significant takeaway was that as that egoic identity, as that personal identity was relaxed because I wasn't feeding it constantly with the world of form, with the visual world, that the conditioned self is always perpetuating itself by saying, what do I think of that? What do I think of that? What do I think of that? When that's relaxed and that personal identity is surrendered more, there's something there that doesn't go away, that all those thoughts and all that noise and all that narration of mind has been covering. When that relaxes and dissipates, something arises, and it's love. And really, in sitting in that vastness, in that stillness, there's the knowing that that's all there is. There is only love. There's only love. There's only one consciousness, and it is a loving consciousness. It's a beingness of pure, unconditional, loving awareness. It's just unconditional, loving awareness. And anything, the recognition was anything that I see as not love is a distortion of my own mind, a story of my own mind. Love may move out of balance, and we experience in the world things where it definitely doesn't seem loving. It's still love. It's just love that has been obscured or manipulated or is out of balance. It's just love out of balance. It's still love. So that deep knowing has been profound in life, to recognize that there's only the love. My love is always conditional. The love just is. That brings us to the fourth real significant transformational takeaway. When we can abide this true grace of being to come forward, to be present and move forward as the primary identity, as the way that we take life in, through this pure loving grace, and the personal story, the construct of self, dissipates and dissolves and falls away and thins and moves into the background. The egoic identity is now in service to our divine nature. When this divine truth of being, this grace of being, is present and prevalent, and we see through that, life becomes so much bigger. Life becomes so much softer. And what I mean by that is, after the retreat, I had rented a room down on Lake Atitlan, and the room had a big window that looked out over the lake and the volcanoes. And it was such a liberation and beauty to rest and watch and visually experience that, and not narrate it with my conditioned self. Remember, my love is conditional. My egoic love, my personal love is always conditional. It's based on I love that, but I can't love that, and that's lovely and that's not so lovely. That's my conditioning that's telling me that. The love just rests in love. And to be able to sit and watch that lake and those volcanoes, and not be in a constant narration of, oh, that's lovely right now because the light's perfect, and no, now it's not so lovely because the light faded and the light changed. But just to be there and always allow it to be the same beautiful grace of consciousness just manifest as lakes and volcanoes. Everything gets so much more vast and large and soft when it's not being taken in, when life isn't being taken in by and assessed by and narrated by the narrow, conditioned, egoic self. So that's the fourth takeaway, is that everything gets much larger and softer when we are not taking it in through, when we're not narrating it through the egoic identity. The fifth real significant takeaway was the recognition, the separation, getting some distance from the conditioned self, the small I, the I that says, I like that, I don't like that, I'm bored with this, I can't abide that. And what a great place to do that, but in a dark room retreat, where that little I is constantly, especially in the beginning, saying, I don't like this. I'm bored. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to handle this. Where's the entertainment? Where's the stuff that is typically feeding that sense of I that feels empty or lacking? When we're disconnected from the true grace of our being, we will feel not enough. And it is that not enoughness that is constantly searching to be fed, to be filled. So this takeaway is the recognition, the separation from that small I, and being able to watch it and notice it. So that when I go through life and I say, ooh, I'm really angry at that person, or I'm really frustrated by this experience, I can now look at it and say, wait a minute, who's that I? Who's that I? My particular construct of conditioning or programming is perturbed by this experience. Another egoic identity next to me might not be perturbed by that exact same experience because they have different conditioning. And when we can look and say, who is that I that is being so petty and taking it so personally, then we can also see then, oh, that's the conditioning. But in the awakened state, it's recognizing, oh, I'm not the conditioning. I'm the awareness within which all conditioning, all sense of thought and beliefs arise and pass and come and go and are born and die. But the pure I am, the real I, the consciousness that we all are, the one I am, is not perturbed, is not needing to shame or blame or hurt. It is just being with. And it may feel a resonance with one thing, and it'll move toward that. And it'll feel that there's no resonance with this other thing, or this other person, or this other condition. It'll move away from that, but without the drama, without the drama. Just say, listening in, what feels resonant, what feels to be in alignment with love that I want to move toward, and what does not, that I may want to move away from. And I'd like to invite you to go to my website. The link's down below, chessedwards.com. And on there, you're going to see all sorts of opportunities to book a complimentary 30-minute discovery session with me. I would love to help guide you on this journey. There's no way I have found to be on this journey and to really walk it with the courage and the grace and the patience and the faith that it takes, without guidance, without working with somebody who has been down this path and who has encountered the typical ways that the resistance shows up, that the ego argues, where the confusions arise, and how to meet all those, and to get a deeper understanding of what is this journey of awakening into your true grace. What is the nature of this grace that you're awakening into? There's so many questions. So please, work with me if you'd like, and reach out to me. I'd be happy to help support you on this journey. And again, thumbs up if you like the video. Please subscribe. And there's a little bell here somewhere. You can click on that, and it'll alert you when new videos come on board. Peace, my friends. Blessings, and much, much love.